The coffee cup shattered on the floor. Margaret Coleman's hands froze mid-wipe on the countertop of her diner. The vibration came first. Not sound, not yet. Just a deep rumble that traveled through the floorboards and into her bones. A tremor that didn't belong to Tuesday mornings in Pinewood, Tennessee. Her diner, Coleman's Kitchen, had stood on Main Street for 28 years. In all that time, she'd never felt anything like this. Henry Adams set down his coffee. The old man was 78 years old and had eaten breakfast at this same corner booth every single morning for 3 decades. His weathered face, usually calm and content, went pale. "Maggie," he said, his voice carried a warning. "You hear that?" She heard it now. The rumble was growing, building, becoming something alive and hungry, something moving toward them with terrible purpose. The door burst open. Lisa Grant stood in the doorway, her librarian's cardigan hanging loose, her face drained of color. Her chest heaved like she'd run all the way from the public library 2 blocks over. "Maggie," the word came out broken, desperate. "You need to see this, right now." Margaret followed her to the window. Her blood turned to ice. Motorcycles, not 5 or 10, not a small group passing through on their way to Nashville or Memphis. Dozens of them. No, more than dozens. She started counting and lost track somewhere past 60. 3 rows stretched the entire length of Main Street, rolling toward her diner in perfect military formation. 97 Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Chrome caught the morning sunlight and threw it back in blinding flashes. Leather-clad riders sat tall in their saddles, every single one wearing the same patch on their backs. The image made her stomach drop. The Hell's Angels' death's head, a grinning skull with wings spread wide. "Lord have mercy," Henry whispered behind her. Margaret's mind raced through possibilities, trying to find an explanation that made sense. What had she done? Who had she offended? She'd lived in this town for 43 years. She'd run this diner for 28, paid her taxes, went to church every Sunday, helped her neighbors when they needed it. She wasn't the kind of person who attracted attention like this. The motorcycles stopped. Right outside her diner, the engines cut off one by one, creating a cascade of silence that felt heavier than the noise. The sudden quiet pressed against her eardrums like physical weight. Lisa's hand trembled over her phone. "Should I call the sheriff?" "No." Margaret didn't know why she said it. Some instinct deep in her gut, some feeling she couldn't name. Not yet. The lead rider dismounted. Tall, maybe 6'3", weathered face that looked to be late 30s, maybe pushing 40. A jagged scar ran across his right eyebrow and disappeared into his hairline. Dark brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. His leather vest was covered in patches she didn't understand, symbols and words from a world she'd never been part of. He removed his helmet. Something flickered in the back of Margaret's memory, distant and fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream after waking. A different winter, a brutal January night 21 years ago. A skinny teenager with hollow cheeks and a split lip, hiding behind her dumpster in the freezing dark. She'd brought him inside that night, fed him chicken soup from a pot she'd made for herself, let him sleep in the storage room and on a sleeping bag with a space heater. Told him something that made him cry my daw, real tears, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. Then he'd vanished before sunrise. No goodbye, no note, just gone. The lead rider started walking toward her door. Behind him, 96 other men did the same. Margaret's heart hammered against her ribs. Every customer in the diner had gone completely silent. Mrs. Patterson from the church clutched her purse like she was preparing to run. A young mother pulled her 2 children close against her body, shielding them with her arms. The door opened. The man stepped inside. He was bigger up close, broader in the shoulders. His presence filled the small space of the diner like he was made of something denser than normal human beings. But his eyes weren't hard. They were searching, looking at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle he'd been working on for 2 decades. He looked around the diner slowly, taking in every detail. The photographs on the wall, the faded pictures of her late husband Thomas standing proud in front of the building when they'd first bought it. The photo of her son Michael in his army uniform, young and strong and smiling. The chalkboard menu written in her careful handwriting. His jaw tightened when he saw Michael's picture. Something passed across his face. Recognition, pain, memory. Margaret Coleman. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel tumbling in a steel drum. But there was something soft underneath it, something vulnerable trying to hide behind all that leather and muscle. She nodded. Her throat had closed up. No words would come. You remember feeding a kid in 2003? The question hung in the air between them. 17 years old, beat to hell, hiding behind your dumpster. The memory grew sharper now, clearer. The boy, the January cold snap that had nearly killed him, the knock on the back door at midnight because she'd heard something, a sound between a cough and a soot. More men filed into the diner behind him. They moved quietly, respectfully, but they filled the small space until there was barely room to breathe. Leather and denim, the smell of road dust and engine oil, tattoos covering arms and necks and hands, patches declaring chapters from cities she'd never been to. But none of them looked threatening. They looked like men waiting for something important. You gave him soup? The man's voice had changed, softer now, almost breaking. You gave him a place to sleep. You told him something he never forgot. Margaret's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against the counter to steady herself. I remember, she whispered. The man's face changed. Something cracked open behind his eyes. Raw emotion bleeding through the tough exterior like water through a fractured dam. Good. His voice caught in his throat, because that kid never forgot you either. The diner was completely silent now. Every customer frozen, every Hell's Angel waiting. Henry Adams slowly stood up from his booth. 30 years of Tuesday mornings, and he'd never seen anything like this. Maggie, he said quietly, you know this man? She stared at the lead writer, searching his face, the scar on his eyebrow, the sharp blue eyes, the way he stood like he was bracing for impact. 21 years was a long time. People changed. Boys became men. Faces aged and hardened and weathered by years and choices. But those eyes, she'd seen those eyes before, filled with tears and terror, staring up at her from behind a dumpster in the freezing January darkness. Ryan? Her voice cracked on his name. Ryan Mitchell? His whole body seemed to exhale, like he'd been holding his breath for 21 years and could finally let it go. Yes, ma'am. Margaret's legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the counter for support, her vision blurred with tears. Oh my God! The words came out broken. Oh my God, Ryan. He took a step toward her, then stopped, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to come closer, like he was afraid she might tell him to leave. I should have come back sooner. His voice was thick with emotion. I should have written, called, something. I'm sorry it took 21 years. I thought you were dead. Margaret's voice broke completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and fast and unstoppable. All these years, I thought you died out there somewhere, alone and cold. I prayed every night that I was wrong. Ryan Mitchell, president of the Tennessee chapter of the Hells Angels, looked like a 17-year-old boy again. Vulnerable, exposed, fighting back tears of his own. You saved my life, Mrs. Coleman. He swallowed hard, trying to hold himself together. That night, everything you did, everything you said. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. It saved my life. Behind him, 96 hardened bikers watched their leader struggle to hold himself together. Not one of them looked surprised. Not one of them looked uncomfortable. They looked like they understood exactly what this moment meant, like they'd been preparing for it. I need to explain something. Ryan's voice grew steadier. I need you to understand why we're here. All of us, 97 brothers who rode 600 miles to see you. Margaret wiped her eyes. Her whole body was shaking, but she forced herself to stand straight, to listen. Okay, but first, he looked around at his brothers, then back to her. I need to take you back to that winter, because you need to understand what you actually did that night, what it meant, and why it changed everything. He turned to the old man still standing by the booth. 21 years ago, this woman didn't just feed a homeless kid. She planted a seed, and that seed grew into something neither of us could have imagined. Henry Adams raised his hand like a schoolboy asking permission to speak. Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but what exactly did Maggie do 21 years ago? Ryan turned to face him fully. She looked at a piece of garbage and saw a human being. His voice hardened with emotion. She looked at someone the whole world had thrown away and said, you matter. Mom, he paused. Let the words sink in. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people walked past me that winter? How many saw a dirty kid in torn clothes and crossed the street? His hands clenched into fists. Hundreds, maybe thousands. He turned back to Margaret. But not her, not Margaret Coleman. She found me freezing to death behind her dumpster. And instead of calling the cops or chasing me off, she brought me inside, fed me, gave me a warm place to sleep. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. She treated me like I was worth something. For the first time in 17 years, someone treated me like I mattered. Margaret's memory was flooding back now, sharp and clear and painful. January 15th, 2003, 11:47 at night. Temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. She'd been locking up the diner when she heard something, a sound that didn't belong to the winter night. She'd found him behind the dumpster. A teenage boy crouched in the snow like a wounded animal. No coat, just a thin hoodie, torn jeans, sneakers with holes so big she could see his bare feet through them. His face was a mess. Black eye, split lip, dried blood on his chin. "Please don't call the cops." His voice had been barely a whisper, shaking from cold and fear. "I'll leave. I just needed to get warm for a minute." She hadn't hesitated, not even for a second. "You're not going anywhere except inside. Come on, before you freeze to death." He'd stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language, like kindness was something he'd never encountered before, something that didn't exist in his world. "Witayo," the question had come out broken. "You don't know me? I could be dangerous." And Margaret, 45 years old at the time, hollowed out by grief, scraped raw by loss, had looked at this broken boy and said something she hadn't planned, something that came from somewhere deep inside her pain. "Because my son Michael believed everyone deserves a chance. He died believing that. And if I let you freeze out there, I'd be letting his belief die too." Ryan Mitchell was speaking now, his voice filling the silent diner. "I need to tell you something, Mrs. Coleman. Something I never got to tell you that night." Margaret watched him, this man who had been a boy, this leader of men who had been a terrified teenager. "When I was 5 years old, my mother dropped me off at a fire station and never came back." The words landed like stones in still water. Just walked away, didn't even say goodbye. The diner seemed to hold its breath. "I went into foster care, bounced through 11 homes in 12 years. Some were okay, most weren't." His jaw tightened. "The last one. The father used a belt buckle on me, for looking at him wrong, for breathing too loud, for existing." One of the bikers behind him, a massive man with gray in his beard, placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Solidarity, support, brotherhood. I ran away when I was 16, hitchhiked 200 miles from Memphis with nothing but the clothes on my back, ate out of garbage cans, slept under bridges, got beaten up twice for my shoes." His voice cracked. "Shoes that didn't even fit right." He took a deep breath. "By the time I found your dumpster, Mrs. Coleman, I'd given up. I wasn't trying to survive anymore. I was just waiting to die. Figured the cold would take me that night. Figured it was easier than fighting." Margaret felt tears streaming down her face. She couldn't stop them. Didn't want to. "But then you came out that back door." Ryan's voice was shaking now. "And you saw me. Really saw me. Not a piece of garbage. Not a problem to deal with. A person." He stepped closer. "You brought me inside. You made me chicken soup, cornbread, apple pie. You set up a sleeping bag in your storage room with a space heater. You gave me clean towels, told me to take a shower, gave me your son's old clothes to wear." His voice broke completely. "Your son's clothes, the son you just lost. And you gave them to me, a stranger, a nobody." Henry Adams was crying now. Mrs. Patterson was crying. The young mother was crying. Half the bikers were wiping their eyes, trying to pretend they weren't. "But that's not what saved me," Ryan continued. "The food, the warmth, the clothes. That would have kept me alive another week, maybe two, but that's not what changed everything." He reached into the pocket of his vest, pulled out something small, a worn piece of paper, creased and soft from years of handling. "You sat down across from me that night, after I'd eaten, while I was warming up, and you said something to me." He unfolded the paper carefully, like it was sacred, like it was the most precious thing he owned. "I was so scared I'd forget your words. So the next morning before I left, I wrote them down on a napkin. And I've carried this napkin with me every single day for 21 years. Margaret's hand covered her mouth. "You said, 'Listen to me, Ryan Mitchell. You matter.'" His voice was shaking now, breaking apart. "I know you don't believe it. I know the world has told you otherwise for 17 years, but you matter. Where you've been doesn't determine where you're going. Broken doesn't mean finished. You're not your past, Ryan. You're what you choose to do next. He looked up from the paper, met her eyes. I told you I didn't know how to be anything but broken. And you said, then you learn, one day at a time, one choice at a time. He carefully folded the napkin, put it back in his pocket, over his heart. That napkin has gotten me through more dark nights than I can count. More moments when I wanted to give up. More times when the world told me I was nothing, and I needed to remember that one woman believed otherwise. Margaret was sobbing now. Hard, ugly crying that came from 21 years of wondering and worrying and hoping. Ryan, she could barely get the word out. Ryan, I had no idea. How could you? He smiled through his own tears. I disappeared, left that note and vanished. Never gave you a way to find me. Never came back to show you who I became. He took her hands in his, gentle, careful, like he was holding something precious. But I need you to know something, Mrs. Coleman. Everything I've built, everything I've become, every good thing I've done in 21 years, it all started in your storage room with a bowl of chicken soup and a woman who chose to see me. He turned to his brothers. These men didn't come here because I asked them to. They came because every single one of them has a story like mine. Every one of them was written off, thrown away, told they didn't matter, and every one of them survived because someone, somewhere, chose to see them. The massive man with gray in his beard stepped forward. His voice was rough and deep like gravel and thunder. Name's Sam Turner. I was 13 when my parents kicked me out for telling them I was gay. Lived on the streets for 2 years before a mechanic took me in, taught me a trade, gave me a reason to live. That mechanic's dead now, but I carry him with me every day. Another biker stepped forward, younger, maybe 30, tattoos covering both arms. I'm Tyler Brooks, aged out of foster care at 18 with nowhere to go. A librarian let me sleep in the back of her library for 3 months. Helped me get my GED. Believed in me when nobody else did. One by one, bikers stepped forward, sharing their stories, their moments of grace, the strangers who had seen them when the world looked away. We ride for people like you, Mrs. Coleman. Ryan's voice cut through the testimonies. People who choose kindness when it would be easier to turn away. People who see value in the broken. He squeezed her hands. But there's another reason we're here, and you're not going to like it. Margaret's tears slowed. Something in Ryan's voice had shifted. Harder now, more urgent. What do you mean? Ryan looked at Sam Turner, who was now holding a laptop. We know what's happening to you, Mrs. Coleman. The bank, the loan, the company trying to take your land. Margaret's face went pale. How do you know about that? Because 3 weeks ago, one of my brothers was sitting in a bar in Nashville, and he heard a lawyer bragging about some stubborn old widow he was about to crush. Ryan's jaw tightened. This lawyer worked for something called Pinewood Property Development. Said they'd bought up your mortgage through some subsidiary. Said they were going to foreclose on you in 30 days. Take your diner. Turn your land into part of some luxury resort. Margaret's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Ryan hadn't caught her, held her steady. How? She couldn't finish the sentence. The lawyer thought it was funny. Ryan's voice was cold now, controlled rage simmering just beneath the surface. Thought it was hilarious that some old woman was going to lose everything, and she didn't even have a lawyer to fight back. He was laughing about it, celebrating. He helped Margaret into a chair. What that lawyer didn't know was that my brother sitting at the next table had spent 15 years as a corporate attorney before he joined us. And when he heard the name Margaret Coleman in the town Pinewood, Tennessee, he called me immediately. Ryan crouched down to meet her eyes. I couldn't believe it at first. Had to confirm it 3 times. The woman who saved my life and some corporate vultures are trying to steal her home. His eyes blazed with barely contained fury. Not while I'm breathing. Not while 97 of us have air in our lungs. Margaret was shaking, not from fear anymore. From something else. Shock. Disbelief. The weight of everything crashing down at once. I didn't want anyone to know. She whispered. I didn't want to burden the town. I was just going to let it go. Pack up. Leave quietly. Leave, Ryan's voice was sharp. This diner was your husband's dream. This is where your son's memory lives. You were just going to walk away? I don't have $340,000, Ryan. I don't have a lawyer. I don't have anything except a building full of memories and a mountain of debt I never even understood. You have us. Ryan stood up. Mrs. Coleman, these men behind me aren't just bikers. We have lawyers. Accountants, business owners, former cops, former military, former everything. We have resources you can't imagine. He pointed to Sam Turner. Sam spent 15 years as a corporate attorney before he walked away from a firm that was defending a company poisoning children. He's the best financial forensics expert I've ever met. Sam nodded at Margaret. Ma'am, we've spent the last 3 weeks investigating Pinewood property development, found irregularities in their acquisition process, predatory lending practices that violate federal law, shell companies with offshore connections that look a lot like money laundering. Ryan pulled a folder from inside his vest. We've already filed complaints with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Tennessee Attorney General, and 3 different banking commissions. We've also been talking to some investigative journalists who are very interested in how this company has been treating elderly property owners across the South. He handed Margaret the folder. But there's one more thing. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. Margaret looked at the amount, $340,000. Ryan, her voice was barely audible. I can't take this. You're not taking it. You are receiving it from family. Family? Every Hell's Angels chapter that's part of our Second Chance program contributed. Brothers from 23 states. Men who were once broken boys just like me. Men who understand what you did and why it matters. He pressed the check into her hands. You gave me a roof when I had nothing. Now we're going to make damn sure you keep yours. Margaret stared at the check, stared at Ryan, stared at the 96 men filling her diner. I don't understand, she said. I just made you soup. I just let you sleep in my storage room. It was nothing. Nothing? Ryan shook his head. Mrs. Coleman, you did more for me in one night than anyone had done in 17 years. You saw a human being when everyone else saw garbage. You chose kindness when you had every reason to turn away. He knelt down beside her chair. You were grieving. You'd lost your son 6 months before. Michael was killed serving his country. You'd lost your husband Thomas 3 months before that. You were drowning in pain, and when you found a broken boy behind your dumpster, you could have ignored him. Should have ignored him, probably. You had every excuse. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. But you didn't. You brought me inside. You fed me. You gave me your dead son's clothes. And you sat down across from a stranger and told him he mattered. Tears were streaming down both their faces now. That wasn't nothing, Mrs. Coleman. That was everything. That was the moment my life started. Everything good that's happened since. Everything I've built, everyone I've helped, every kid who's been fed and sheltered because of our programs, it all traces back to you, to that night, to a bowl of chicken soup and 5 words. He took her hands again. You matter, Ryan Mitchell. That's what you said. And I've spent 21 years trying to prove you right. The diner was silent except for quiet crying. Customers, bikers, the old man in the corner booth, the young mother holding her children, all of them wiping tears. Henry Adams finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Maggie, why didn't you tell us about the foreclosure? We're your friends. We're your community. We would have helped. Margaret shook her head. Thomas built this place. Michael grew up here. When they died, this diner was all I had left of them. Losing it felt like losing them all over again. I couldn't bear to talk about it. You're not losing anything, Ryan said firmly. Not today, not ever. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. He stood up, turned to his brothers. Here's what's going to happen. The lawyers in our group are going to meet with Mrs. Coleman's bank this week. We're going to present our evidence of predatory lending. We're going to make it very clear that if they don't back off, the federal investigations and the news coverage will destroy them. Sam Turner stepped forward. We've also reached out to a real estate attorney who specializes in fighting corporate land grabs. She's the best in Tennessee. She's driving down here tomorrow. Another biker spoke up, young, maybe mid-20s, intelligent eyes behind his rough exterior. I've got contacts at 2 major news networks. They're very interested in a story about elderly widows being targeted by corporate predators, especially when the heroes are Hell's Angels who rode 600 miles to help. Ryan turned back to Margaret. You're not alone anymore, Mrs. Coleman. You never have to be alone again. Margaret looked around her diner, at the photographs of Thomas and Michael, at the counter Thomas had built with his own hands, at the chalkboard menu she wrote fresh every morning, at the red and white checkered curtains she'd sewn herself, at the 97 men who had traveled hundreds of miles because 21 years ago she had chosen to see a broken boy instead of looking away. Ryan, she said quietly, I need to ask you something. Anything. What happened to you after you left that night? Where did you go? How did you end up here? Ryan smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. That's a long story, Mrs. Coleman. I've got time. He looked at his brothers. Some of them were already settling into booths, making themselves comfortable. Others were examining the menu. A few had drifted toward the kitchen, probably checking out her setup. We all have time, he said, but first, I need to know something. What? That cinnamon roll recipe you used to make, the one you gave me that first morning. Do you still have it? Margaret blinked. Of course. It was my grandmother's recipe. Ryan's smile widened. Good, because these men rode 600 miles on empty stomachs, and I've been telling them for years about those cinnamon rolls. For the first time since the motorcycles appeared, Margaret laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere deep and genuine. You want me to make cinnamon rolls for 97 bikers? If it's not too much trouble. She stood up slowly, wiped her eyes, looked around at the impossible scene in her small diner. Well, she said, I better get started then. Henry Adams was already rolling up his sleeves. Thought you'd never ask, Maggie. Within an hour, Coleman's kitchen had transformed into something magical. Bikers were everywhere, some helping in the kitchen, some rearranging tables to create more seating. Some had gone outside to direct traffic around the wall of motorcycles blocking Main Street. The smell of cinnamon and sugar filled the air. Margaret worked like she hadn't worked in years. Something had shifted inside her. The heaviness she'd been carrying for months. The foreclosure. The fear. The loneliness. It had lifted slightly. Not gone, but lighter. Manageable. Ryan stood beside her at the counter, watching her roll dough with practiced hands. You remember that night when I asked you why you were helping me? I remember. You said it was because of Michael, because he believed everyone deserves a chance. Margaret's hands paused on the dough. Tell me about him, your son, if you want to. She was quiet for a long moment, then she began to speak. Michael was the best person I ever knew. Not because he was my son, because of who he was. He had this light in him, this belief that people were fundamentally good, even when evidence suggested otherwise. She resumed rolling the dough. He joined the army right out of high school, not because he wanted to fight, because he wanted to help, wanted to protect people, wanted to make a difference. Her voice caught. He was killed in Afghanistan in July 2002. Roadside bomb. He was 23 years old. He'd been there 6 months. I'm sorry. Thomas died 3 months later. Heart attack. The doctor said it was cardiac failure. I've always believed he died of a broken heart. She shaped the dough into rolls. Her movements automatic. Practiced. Muscle memory taking over while her mind wandered through painful memories. When I found you behind that dumpster, Ryan, I'd been asking God for a sign. Any sign that there was still a reason to keep going. That there was still something worth living for. She looked at him. And then there you were. This broken boy who needed help. And I thought maybe, just maybe, helping you could be a way of honoring Michael. A way of keeping his belief alive. Ryan was silent for a long moment. I didn't know that. I had no idea you were going through that when you helped me. You had your own pain. I wasn't going to burden you with mine. Mrs. Coleman. He shook his head. You lost your son and your husband within 6 months. You were drowning in grief. And instead of closing yourself off, you opened your door to a stranger. It was the only thing that made sense at the time. It was extraordinary. It is extraordinary. She waved him off. It was soup in a sleeping bag. It was everything, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you understand that. Ryan pulled out his phone. The gesture seemed casual, but Margaret saw the tension in his shoulders. Something was wrong. I want to show you something. He pulled up a photograph, a building, modern and clean, but with a warmth to it that suggested more than just architecture. A sign out front read, The Michael Coleman Second Chance Foundation, Nashville Youth Center. Margaret froze. Her hands stopped moving on the dough. The kitchen sounds faded into background noise. All she could see was that sign, her son's name, in permanent letters, on a building that existed in the real world. Ryan, what is this? It's a youth center in Nashville. We opened it 3 years ago. It helps homeless kids get back on their feet. Food, shelter, job training, counseling. He swiped to another photo, another building. Same sign, different city. This one's in Memphis, another swipe. This one's in Chattanooga. Margaret's hands were shaking. You named them after Michael. Who else would I name them after? The woman who saved me and the son whose memory inspired her to do it. He put the phone away. Those centers have helped over 3,000 kids in the past 3 years, Mrs. Coleman. 3,000 broken boys and girls who got a second chance because of what you did for me. Margaret couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what she was hearing. 3,000 kids. Michael's name. Centers across Tennessee. I don't. She tried to find words. I don't understand how this is possible. It's possible because kindness multiplies, Ryan said. You helped me. I got back on my feet, found purpose, built something, and now I help others who will help others who will help others. He gestured at the bikers filling her diner. Every one of these men contributes to the foundation. Time, money, skills, whatever they have, because every one of them understands what it's like to be given a second chance. Sam Turner, the former attorney, approached with a plate of fresh cinnamon rolls. Mrs. Coleman, these are incredible. Thank you. Her voice was distant, still processing. Ryan told us about these for years, made us all jealous. Said they were the best thing he'd ever tasted. Ryan nodded. First real food I'd eaten in weeks. Thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Sam set down the plate. His expression grew serious. Ma'am, I want you to know something. Before I joined this club, I was a corporate lawyer. Made a lot of money helping companies do terrible things. Pollute, cheat, exploit. He sat down across from her. I hated myself. Hated what I'd become. One night I was sitting in a bar planning to end it all. And this guy sits down next to me. He pointed at Ryan. This guy covered in patches, looking like every mother's nightmare. And he starts talking to me, asking questions, listening, actually listening. Sam's voice thickened. By the end of the night, I'd told him everything. All my shame, all my guilt, all my self-hatred. And you know what he said? Margaret shook her head. He said, you matter. Where you've been doesn't determine where you're going. Broken doesn't mean finished. Sam looked at Ryan with something like reverence. Sound familiar? Margaret's breath caught. Those were your words, Mrs. Coleman. The words you said to him 21 years ago. The words he's been passing on ever since. To me, to hundreds of others, to thousands probably. He reached out and took her hand. You didn't just save one boy that night. You started a chain reaction. And it's still going, still spreading, still changing lives. The cinnamon rolls were disappearing faster than Margaret could make them. Bikers crowded around her counter, waiting their turn, chatting with locals, laughing at jokes, complimenting the coffee. It looked absurd. 97 leather-clad Hells Angels in a small Tennessee diner, eating cinnamon rolls and talking to church ladies. But it felt right. Lisa Grant had stopped being terrified an hour ago. Now she was taking photos with bikers, posting them to social media. Strangest Tuesday morning ever, she typed, but also kind of beautiful. Henry Adams had found a kindred spirit in Sam Turner, and they were deep in conversation about vintage motorcycles and the proper way to restore a 1967 Harley. Even the young mother had relaxed. Her kids were now sitting with a group of bikers who were teaching them some kind of complicated handshake routine. Ryan stood with Margaret at the window, watching it all. This is what it looks like, he said quietly. What? Community. Real community. Not based on fear or judgment. Based on seeing each other. Margaret looked at the scene before her. The impossible collision of worlds. Ryan, can I ask you something? Of course. After you left that night, where did you go? What happened? He was quiet for a moment. That's a longer story, a harder story. I want to hear it, all of it. He nodded slowly. Then I'll tell you, but not here. Not like this. Tomorrow when the lawyers meet with the bank, when the next phase of this fight begins, I'll tell you everything. Where I went, what I did, how I found the club, why I built what I built. He placed his hand over his heart. But I want you to understand something first, Mrs. Coleman. Whatever I tell you tomorrow, whatever darkness you hear about, it all led here, to this moment, to 97 men who believe in second chances because someone believed in them first. His eyes locked on hers. You asked me once if I could be dangerous. The answer is yes, I have been dangerous. I've done things I'm not proud of, made choices that haunt me. He leaned closer. But I've also saved lives, protected the weak, built something that matters. And every single time I made the right choice instead of the wrong one, it was because I heard your voice in my head telling me I mattered. telling me I was more than my past. He pulled back. So whatever you hear tomorrow, whatever you learn about who I became and what I've done, remember this moment. Remember 97 men who rode 600 miles because one woman chose kindness over fear. The sun was setting over Pinewood. Most of the bikers had left, spreading out to local motels, setting up camp for however long this fight would take. A few remained at the diner, helping clean up, standing guard. Ryan stood at the door ready to leave. Mrs. Coleman, one last thing. Margaret looked up from wiping down the counter. That check, the $340,000, I know you're struggling to accept it. She nodded. It still sat on the counter, untouched. I want you to think about something tonight. Every dollar in that check represents a broken person who got a second chance. Every chapter that contributed did it because they understand what you did and what it means. He picked up the check, placed it in her hands. Accepting this isn't charity. It's recognition. It's your community. A community you didn't even know you had, saying thank you. Margaret looked at the check, at the number, at the weight of what it represented. Ryan, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just cash it. Save your diner. Honor your husband's dream. Keep Michael's memory alive. He smiled. And tomorrow when I come back, you can tell me the story of how you and Thomas met, how you built this place, what Michael was like as a kid. His voice softened. Because I realized something today, Mrs. Coleman. You know everything about me, but I know almost nothing about you. And you're the most important person in my life. Margaret felt tears threatening again. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. Ryan nodded, opened the door, paused. Thank you, Mrs. Coleman, for the soup, for the sleeping bag, for the words I've carried for 21 years. He stepped out into the fading light, and thank you for proving that one person can change everything. The door closed behind him. Margaret stood alone in her diner, holding a check for $340,000, surrounded by the smell of cinnamon and the echo of 97 engines fading into the Tennessee night. She looked at the photo of Michael on the wall, the photo of Thomas beside it. Well, she said softly, I think you two have some explaining to do, because this is definitely not how I expected today to go. She could have sworn she heard Thomas laugh. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat in her living room until 3 in the morning, holding the check Ryan had given her, staring at the number that could save everything. $340,000, more money than she'd ever seen in one place, enough to pay off the predatory loan, keep the diner, preserve Thomas's dream. But it wasn't the money keeping her awake. It was the look in Ryan's eyes when he'd said he'd been dangerous, the weight behind those words, the shadows she'd glimpsed beneath the surface. What had happened to that broken boy after he left her storage room? What had he become? At 7 the next morning, she was already at the diner when Ryan's motorcycle pulled up. Alone this time. No formation, no thunder of 97 engines. Just one man on one bike. He walked through the door looking different than yesterday. Softer somehow, or maybe just tired. You didn't sleep either, he said. No. Figured. He sat down at the counter. Coffee. She poured him a cup without asking how he took it. Black. She remembered. The lawyers are meeting with the bank at 2, he said. Sam thinks we have a strong case. The predatory lending angle is solid. Good. Silence stretched between them. You want to know, Ryan said. It wasn't a question. I need to know. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, stared into the dark liquid like it held answers. After I left your storage room that morning, I walked north. No plan, no destination. Just moving because standing still felt like dying. Margaret sat down across from him. The diner was empty. It was Wednesday, and after yesterday's chaos, she'd decided to stay closed. A handwritten sign on the door read, Personal emergency. Back tomorrow. I made it about 30 miles before I collapsed. Hadn't eaten since your cinnamon rolls. Hadn't slept properly in weeks. My body just gave out on the side of the highway. What happened? A trucker found me. Big guy named Earl. Drove long haul routes between Memphis and Chicago. He could have left me there, called the cops, kept driving. Ryan's jaw tightened. Instead, he put me in his cab, fed me, let me ride with him for 2 weeks while I got my strength back. Another stranger showing kindness. Yeah, that's the thing I learned, Mrs. Coleman. The world is full of people who look away, but it's also full of people who don't. You just have to survive long enough to find them. He took a long drink of coffee. Earl dropped me in Louisville, helped me get a job at a truck stop, washing dishes, mopping floors, whatever they needed. I worked there for 8 months, saved every penny I could. That's when things got better? Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's when things got worse. Margaret's stomach tightened. The truck stop was owned by a man named Victor Stone. Seemed legitimate on the surface. Good businessman, community leader, donated to local charities. Ryan's hands clenched around the coffee cup. Turns out Victor was running drugs through his truck stop, using his legitimate business as a front. And he needed young guys with no family, no connections, no one who would miss them if they disappeared. Ryan. He approached me after I'd been there 6 months. Said he had a special job for me. Said it paid 10 times what I was making. Said all I had to do was drive a truck from Louisville to Detroit and not ask questions about what was in the back. His eyes met hers. I said no. Margaret exhaled. That was my first mistake. What do you mean? People like Victor don't take no for an answer, especially not from nobody kids with no protection. He told me I had two choices, drive the truck or end up in a ditch somewhere. Ryan stood up abruptly, walked to the window, stood with his back to her. I ran, stole $300 from the register, and disappeared in the middle of the night. Hitchhiked to Cincinnati, then Indianapolis, then Chicago. Kept moving, kept looking over my shoulder, kept waiting for Victor's people to find me. Did they? Eventually, took them 8 months. I was working construction in Gary, Indiana. Thought I was safe. Thought I'd finally outrun my past. He turned back to face her. 3 of Victor's guys grabbed me outside my apartment, beat me half to death, left me in an alley with a message. Victor wanted his money back. With interest. $15,000. I had 2 weeks. Margaret's hand covered her mouth. I had maybe $200 to my name. No way to get $15,000 in 2 weeks. I knew what was coming. Knew they'd kill me. Make an example out of me. So what did you do? Ryan sat back down. His movements were slower now, heavier. I did the only thing I could think of. I found the most dangerous people in Gary and asked for help. The Hells Angels? Not at first. First, they found a local gang. Told them about Victor. Told them he was running drugs through their territory without paying tribute. Told them where his trucks would be and when. Ryan's voice had gone cold. I sold out the man who wanted me dead. Gave his enemies everything they needed to destroy his operation. And in exchange, they protected me. Margaret didn't know what to say. That gang got hit by police 2 months later. Half of them went to prison. The other half scattered. I was alone again. But Victor's operation was gone. His people had bigger problems than finding some kid who owed them money. How did you end up with the Hells Angels? I drifted for another year. Worked odd, stayed invisible. But I was angry, Mrs. Coleman, angry at Victor, angry at the system that had failed me my whole life, angry at a world that treated people like me as disposable. He looked at her directly. That anger almost destroyed me. I got into fights, started drinking, made stupid choices. I was on a path to prison or the morgue, and I didn't care which one. What changed? Frank Morrison. The name hung in the air between them. I was 22, working at a bar in Lexington, got into a fight with 3 guys who were harassing a waitress. They were drunk, rich, entitled, thought they could do whatever they wanted. Ryan's hands flexed. I put 2 of them in the hospital, broke the 3rd one's jaw. Would have killed him if someone hadn't pulled me off. Frank, he'd been watching from across the bar, president of the Kentucky chapter of the Hells Angels. 53 years old, had seen everything, done everything. Ryan's voice softened. He walked over to me, blood still on my knuckles, cops on the way, and he said something I'll never forget. What? He said, you've got a choice right now, kid. Let that anger control you and end up dead or in prison, or learn to channel it into something that matters. Ryan shook his head. I told him to go to hell. Told him I didn't need advice from some old biker. Told him I was beyond saving. What did he do? He laughed, actually laughed. Then he said, boy, I've been where you are. I've done worse than you can imagine. And I'm still here, still breathing, still trying to make it right. Ryan's eyes glistened. He said, someone once told me that broken doesn't mean finished, that where you've been doesn't determine where you're going. Took me 40 years to believe it. Maybe you'll learn faster than I did. Margaret's breath caught. Your words, the words I'd told you 5 years earlier. Somehow they'd reached Frank Morrison. He'd heard them from someone who'd heard them from someone who'd heard them from me. That's not possible. It is possible. That's the thing about kindness, Mrs. Coleman. It spreads in ways you can't predict. It echoes through lives you'll never meet. Ryan leaned forward. I told a woman at a shelter in Cincinnati. She told a counselor. The counselor told a veteran. The veteran told Frank. His voice broke. Your words saved my life twice. Once when you said them to me, and once when they came back through Frank Morrison at the exact moment I needed them. Ryan's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression changed instantly. From vulnerable to hard in a heartbeat. What is it? Sam, something's wrong. He answered the call. Talk to me. Margaret watched his face go through a series of transformations. Confusion, disbelief, then cold, controlled fury. Are you sure? How did they know? He listened for another 30 seconds, then hung up. Ryan, what's happening? The bank meeting is canceled. Pinewood Property Development filed an emergency motion this morning. They've accelerated the foreclosure hearing to Friday. Friday, that's 3 days away. They know we're coming. They know we have evidence against them, and they're trying to ram this through before we can stop them. Margaret felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. How? How do they know? Someone talked. Someone in this town told them about our lawyers, about our plans, about everything. Ryan's jaw clenched. We have a leak, Mrs. Coleman. Someone is feeding them information. And if we don't find out who, we're going to lose this fight before it even starts. The phone buzzed again. Ryan looked at it. Sam's on his way. He wants to meet now. Where? Here. Your diner. We need to figure out our next move before they make theirs. 30 minutes later, 8 Hells Angels sat around Margaret's tables. Sam Turner, Tyler Brooks, Marcus Wells, 5 others whose names Margaret was still learning. Walk me through what happened, Ryan said. Sam spread documents across the table. I called the bank at 8 this morning to confirm our 2 o'clock meeting. They said the meeting was off. Pinewood Property Development's lawyers had filed an emergency motion last night, claiming imminent risk to their investment. On what grounds? They're claiming Margaret violated her loan covenant by making unauthorized modifications to the property, specifically the new walk-in freezer she installed 3 years ago. Margaret's head snapped up. That freezer was approved. I have the permits. Do you have written authorization from the original mortgage holder? The original? They never asked for that. I dealt with First Tennessee Bank. They approved everything. Sam's face was grim. When Pinewood Property Development bought your mortgage, the terms changed. Buried in the transfer paperwork was a clause requiring written authorization for any structural modifications. You never got that authorization because you didn't know you needed it. This is insane. It's a freezer. It's a technicality. And their lawyers are very good at finding technicalities. Ryan slammed his fist on the table. This isn't about a freezer. This is about shutting us down before we can expose them. Agreed, but that doesn't change the legal reality. They've got a hearing in 3 days, and right now they've got the upper hand. So what do? Sam pulled out another stack of papers. We fight. We file counter motions. We demand a continuance based on the predatory lending evidence. We make so much noise that the judge has no choice but to slow this down. Will it work? I don't know. Depends on the judge. Depends on what other evidence we can find, and depends on whether we can figure out who's feeding them information. Tyler Brooks spoke up. I've been asking around town. The woman who was here yesterday, Lisa Grant, the librarian, she was texting the whole time we were here, posting to social media. Social media isn't the same as feeding information to lawyers. No, but she's connected to someone who might be. Her brother works for a real estate development company in Nashville, Thompson and Associates. They've done business with Pinewood Property Development before. Margaret felt something cold settle in her stomach. Lisa's been coming here for years. She wouldn't. Maybe she didn't know what she was sharing. Maybe her brother just asked questions. But the connection is there. Ryan turned to Margaret. What did you tell Lisa about the foreclosure? I didn't. I never told anyone. Think anything. Any conversation where you mentioned the bank, the loan, the pressure you were under. Margaret searched her memory. A few weeks ago, I was stressed. She asked what was wrong. I said I was having some financial troubles with the diner. That's all. That's all? I might have mentioned the bank was being difficult, that I was worried about losing the place. Sam nodded slowly. That's enough. If Lisa mentioned that to her brother, and her brother passed it to Pinewood Property Development, They would have known you were vulnerable, known when to strike. But she's my friend. She might still be your friend. She might have had no idea what she was doing, but the result is the same. They knew about your situation before you even knew they'd bought your mortgage. Margaret's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily. So what now? How do we fight people who seem to know everything before we do? Ryan's expression hardened into something sharp and dangerous. We stop playing defense. We start playing offense. Ryan looked around the table at his brothers, at Sam Turner with his laptop open and documents scattered everywhere, at Tyler Brooks leaning forward, ready for instructions, at Marcus Wells, quiet but intense, fingers drumming against the table. Sam, I want everything you can dig up on Pinewood Property Development's executives, personal finances, business dealings, any hint of impropriety. Already working on it. Tyler, I want someone watching Lisa Grant, not threatening, just watching. See who she talks to, what she does. Done. Marcus, you said you had journalist contacts. I want stories planted, rumors about Pinewood Property Development being under federal investigation. Marcus hesitated. That's risky. If they find out we're spreading false information, everything we're doing could backfire. Everything we're doing is risky, but we're not going to sit here and wait for them to take Margaret's home. Ryan stood. We have 3 days. In 3 days, either they get what they want or we stop them. There's no middle ground. He looked at Margaret. Mrs. Coleman, I need you to trust me. What we're about to do isn't going to be pretty. It's not going to be clean, but it's the only way to protect what you've built. Margaret thought about Thomas, about something he used to say, that good people don't have the luxury of staying clean, that sometimes you have to get dirty to protect what matters. She took a breath. Do what you have to do, Ryan. I'll stand by you. Ryan nodded. Something passed between them, an understanding, a partnership forged in one night 21 years ago and strengthened by everything that had happened since. All right, let's get to work. The next 48 hours blurred together. Sam Turner and 2 other biker lawyers worked around the clock, preparing counter motions, gathering evidence, building a case that Pinewood Property Development had engaged in systematic predatory lending practices across 6 states. Tyler Brooks reported back on Lisa Grant. She wasn't a spy. She was just a woman who talked too much to a brother who passed information to the wrong people. When Tyler confronted her, gently, she broke down crying. Had no idea she'd put Margaret at risk. Wanted to help fix it. Marcus Wells' journalist contacts started making calls. Questions about Pinewood Property Development's offshore accounts. Questions about suspicious land deals. Questions that made executives nervous. And Ryan was everywhere, coordinating, planning, pushing. Margaret watched him work and saw both the boy she'd saved and the man he'd become. The controlled intensity, the strategic mind, the absolute refusal to let anyone hurt people under his protection. She also saw the toll it was taking. The sleepless nights, the tension in his shoulders, the weight of fighting a war on multiple fronts. On Thursday night, she found him alone in the diner, staring at a map covered in notes and pins. You should sleep. Can't. Too much to do. Ryan, you can't help me if you collapse. He rubbed his eyes. I know. I just can't fail at this, Mrs. Coleman. I can't let them take your home. Not after everything. This isn't all on you. It feels like it is. She sat down beside him. Can I tell you something about Michael? He looked up. He used to do this, take everything on himself, feel like if anything went wrong, it was his fault, his responsibility, his burden. What did you tell him? I told him that strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about knowing when to share the weight. She put her hand on his arm. You've got 97 brothers who rode 600 miles to help. You've got lawyers working around the clock. You've got a whole town starting to wake up to what's happening. You're not alone in this fight. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Frank used to say something similar. He said the biggest mistake strong people make is thinking they have to be strong by themselves. Smart man. He was. Died 3 years ago. Heart attack. Never got to see the youth centers. Never got to see how far the program spread. He'd be proud. Yeah, I hope so. They sat in silence for a while. The quiet of the diner. The weight of everything bearing down. Mrs. Coleman, can I ask you something? Anything. That night when you found me behind your dumpster, why didn't you call the cops? It would have been the normal thing to do, the safe thing. Margaret thought about it, really thought. Because when I looked at you, I didn't see a threat. I saw Michael. I saw every kid who ever fell through the cracks. I saw someone who needed help, not handcuffs. But you didn't know me. I could have been anyone. You could have been, but my gut told me you were just a kid in trouble, and my heart told me that turning you in would be the same as giving up on you, the same as saying you weren't worth saving. She looked at him. I couldn't do that. Not when I just lost a son who believed everyone deserved a chance. Turning you away would have been betraying everything Michael stood for. Ryan's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I've spent 21 years trying to live up to what you saw in me that night, trying to be worthy of your faith. You have, Ryan, more than you know. His phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression shifted. Sam, he says he found something. Something big. What? He wouldn't say on the phone. He's on his way here. 15 minutes later, Sam burst through the door, laptop in hand, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I found it. The connection. The thing that's going to bring them down. What is it? Sam opened his laptop and turned it toward them. Pinewood Property Development isn't just a development company. It's a front, a shell corporation owned by a larger entity called Stone Holdings. Margaret didn't recognize the name, but Ryan did. His face went white. Stone, as in Victor Stone. The same. Victor Stone was convicted of drug trafficking in 2008, served 10 years, got out in 2018. And the first thing he did was restructure his business empire. Sam pulled up more documents. Pinewood Property Development is one of 17 subsidiaries under Stone Holdings. They've been buying up properties across the South using predatory lending practices. It's a massive money laundering operation disguised as real estate development. Ryan stood up so fast his chair fell over. Victor Stone is the one trying to take Margaret's diner. Not directly, but he owns the company that owns the company that owns her mortgage. It's all connected. Every property they have acquired has been funneled into the same offshore accounts that funded his drug operation 20 years ago. Margaret looked between them. Who is Victor Stone? Ryan's voice was hollow. The man who tried to recruit me to run drugs when I was 18. The man who sent 3 guys to beat me half to death when I refused. The man I thought I destroyed. He turned to face her. Mrs. Coleman, this isn't just about your diner anymore. Victor Stone has been building an empire while I thought he was gone. And somehow he's connected to you. That's not possible. I've never met anyone named Victor Stone. Are you sure? 20 years in business? Thousands of customers? Suppliers? Vendors? Margaret's mind raced. Stone Holdings. Stone. Her blood ran cold. Thomas's construction company. Before we opened the diner, he worked for a contracting firm that did jobs all over the region. What was the firm called? She searched her memory, old papers, old conversations, old details she'd never thought to remember. Stone Construction Services. Thomas worked for Victor Stone 30 years ago before either of us knew what he really was. The room went silent. This isn't a coincidence. Ryan sat down slowly. Victor targeting your property. The predatory lending. The rush to foreclose. You think he knows who I am? I think he might know more than that. I think he might know about me, about what I did to his operation in Louisville, about the connection between us. Sam spoke quietly. If that's true, then this whole thing might not be about the land at all. It might be personal. Margaret felt fear crawling up her spine. Personal how? Ryan looked at her with something terrible in his eyes. Revenge. Victor Stone is a patient man. He waits, he plans, and he never ever forgets a betrayal. He stood. He couldn't get to me directly. I'm too protected, too connected. But you're the woman who saved me, the foundation of everything I built. If he knows about you, if he's figured out the connection, then he's not trying to take your diner for money. His voice dropped to a whisper. He's trying to destroy you to destroy me. Margaret's hands were shaking. So what do we do? Ryan's expression hardened into something she'd never seen before. Something cold and ancient and absolutely terrifying. We end him, once and for all. Ryan made calls all night. Margaret sat at the counter and listened to fragments of conversations. Names she didn't recognize. Places she'd never heard of. A network spreading across states, mobilizing in ways she couldn't begin to understand. By 4 in the morning, 23 more Hells Angels had arrived in Pinewood. By 6, that number had doubled. They filled the parking lot outside her diner, their motorcycles gleaming in the pre-dawn darkness, their faces hard with purpose. Sam hadn't slept either. His laptop was surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered documents. Every few minutes, he'd find something new. Another connection, another shell company, another thread in Victor Stone's web of corruption. Ryan, Sam's voice cut through the exhausted silence. You need to see this. Ryan walked over and Margaret followed. On the screen was a photograph. A man in his 60s, silver hair, expensive suit, standing outside a courthouse with a satisfied smile. That's him, that's Victor. Taken last month, he attended a charity gala in Nashville, donated $500,000 to a children's hospital. Of course he did. That's how he operates. Buy legitimacy with dirty money. Sam scrolled to another document. But here's what's interesting. According to these records, Victor has been personally acquiring properties in small towns across Tennessee for the past 3 years, not through Pinewood Property Development, through a separate entity called Legacy Land Holdings. What kind of properties? Family businesses, diners, hardware stores, auto shops, places that have been around for generations. Margaret's stomach dropped. Why would someone like him care about small businesses? Money laundering. Small cash businesses are perfect for cleaning dirty money. You inflate the revenue, run drug profits through the books, and suddenly it's all legitimate income. But I don't do that. I've never done that. No, but once he owns your property, once he installs his own people, he can do whatever he wants. And nobody would suspect a little diner in a town like Pinewood. Sam pulled up another file. There's more. 12 of the 14 businesses Victor acquired through Legacy Land Holdings were owned by people connected to his past, former employees, former associates, people who knew things about him. He's eliminating witnesses. Ryan's voice was cold. Or controlling them. Once he owns their property, once they're in debt to him, they can't talk. They're trapped. He turned to Margaret. Thomas worked for Stone Construction 30 years ago. What did he know? What did he see? I don't know. Thomas never talked about that job. He left after 2 years, said the company was heading in a bad direction. Did he ever say what he meant by that? Margaret searched her memory, old conversations, fragments of a past she'd never thought to examine. Once, just once, we were talking about Michael, about him joining the army. Thomas said he understood why Michael wanted to serve. Said he'd seen what happens when good people do nothing while bad men build empires. She paused. That's it. He wouldn't say more. Said some things were better left buried. Ryan and Sam exchanged looks. Mrs. Coleman, is it possible Thomas saw something at Stone Construction? Something that could have gotten him in trouble if he talked? I don't know, maybe. He was so private about that part of his life. Ryan stood. Is there anything of Thomas's left? Documents, photographs, anything that might have been connected to what he saw? Margaret thought hard. There's a box in the attic. Thomas's things from before we were married. I never opened it. He asked me not to. I need to see it. Now. 20 minutes later, Ryan sat at Margaret's kitchen table with a dusty cardboard box in front of him. Margaret stood beside him, arms wrapped around herself. This was Thomas's final secret, the thing he'd carried alone for 3 decades. Ryan opened the box. Inside, beneath old photographs and faded letters, was a manila envelope, sealed, never opened. The handwriting on the front read, "In case something happens to me." Ryan looked at Margaret. May I? She nodded. He opened the envelope. Inside were 3 photographs. Grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. 3 bodies wrapped in plastic being lowered into a pit. Concrete trucks visible in the background. There was also a letter, handwritten, to whoever finds this. My name is Thomas Coleman. On October 14th, 1993, I witnessed 3 men being buried beneath the foundation of the Stone Construction parking structure in Louisville, Kentucky. The men were murdered on orders from Victor Stone. I don't know their names, but I have described them as best I can remember. I am writing this because I am a coward. I saw something terrible and I said nothing. I protected myself and my family instead of speaking the truth. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Maybe Victor finally found me. Maybe my guilt finally caught up with me. Either way, the truth needs to come out. These photographs are proof. The bodies are still there, under 30 feet of concrete. Victor Stone is a murderer, and I am complicit in his crimes by my silence. I don't deserve forgiveness. But maybe if this reaches the right people, some measure of justice can be done. Tell my wife I loved her. Tell my son I'm sorry. Tell them I tried to be a good man, even when I failed. Thomas Coleman. Margaret was sobbing now, deep, wrenching sounds that seemed to come from somewhere fundamental. He knew. He knew it would come back someday. He was ready. Ryan carefully placed the photographs and letter back in the envelope. Mrs. Coleman, your husband just gave us everything we need, these photographs. His testimony, combined with what Sam found, we can take Victor down. Not just down, we can bury him. His phone buzzed. Tyler Brooks. Ryan, the convoy stopped. What convoy? Victor's people. 12 vehicles. They were heading toward town, but they stopped 5 miles out. They're not moving. Ryan looked at the envelope in his hands, at the evidence that could destroy Victor Stone's empire, at the truth Thomas Coleman had been too afraid to tell and too brave to destroy. They know. Somehow they know we found something. How is that possible? I don't know. But Victor Stone didn't survive this long by being stupid. He's got eyes everywhere, ears everywhere. He stood. Call everyone in. We're not waiting for them to make a move. We're going to make ours first. Ryan moved fast. Within 30 minutes, he had the photographs digitized, copied, and sent to every journalist, FBI music contact, and lawyer in their network. If something happened to the originals, if Victor's people got to them, the evidence would already be scattered across a dozen different servers, 100 different hands. It's done, Sam said, closing his laptop. The FBI field office in Nashville is scrambling. They're sending agents. How long? 3 hours. Maybe 4. The hearing is in 6. I know. Margaret stood at the window watching the Hells Angels position themselves around her property. 53 men now, more arriving every hour. A wall of leather and steel between her and whatever was coming. Ryan, what happens when those men in the convoy decide to move? We stop them. How? However we have to. She turned to face him. I won't have people dying for my diner. Not you, not any of them. Mrs. Coleman, this stopped being about your diner the moment we found those photographs. This is about justice for Thomas. For those 3 men buried under concrete. For everyone Victor Stone has ever destroyed. His voice hardened. And if people get hurt, then they get hurt. Some things are worth fighting for. Tyler appeared in the doorway. Ryan, the convoy is moving again. How far? 2 miles out. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Ryan grabbed his jacket. Everyone in position, ready and waiting. Mrs. Coleman, I need you to stay inside. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you do not come outside until I tell you it's safe. Margaret grabbed his arm. Ryan, promise me you'll come back. He looked at her. The woman who had saved his life. The woman who had believed in him when no one else would. I promise. He walked out into the morning light. The convoy arrived at exactly 7:23 in the morning. 12 vehicles, black SUVs with tinted windows. They stopped at the edge of town, engines running, forming a line that blocked the main road. Ryan stood in front of the diner flanked by 20 of his brothers. The others were positioned around the perimeter. Invisible, but ready. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the lead SUV's door opened. The man who stepped out wasn't what Ryan expected. Not a thug, not a soldier. He was tall and elegant with silver hair and a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Victor Stone. Ryan hadn't seen him in person for over 20 years. The man had aged, but his eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, the eyes of a predator who had never known what it meant to be prey. Ryan Mitchell. Victor's voice carried across the distance between them. Smooth as silk, dangerous as a blade. You've grown up. Last time I saw you, you were a skinny kid with a death wish. Last time you saw me, you sent 3 men to beat me to death. How'd that work out for you? Victor smiled. Better than you know. Those men were eliminated shortly after. Couldn't have witnesses, could I? Ryan felt the rage building, pushed it down, controlled it. What do you want, Stone? What I've always wanted. What belongs to me? Victor gestured at the diner behind Ryan. That property sits on land I need. The woman who owns it has something I want. And you? His smile widened. You're an unexpected bonus. I'm going to destroy you. You know that, right? With what? A motorcycle gang and some stolen photographs? Ryan's blood went cold. How do you know about the photographs? Because I know everything, Ryan. I've known about Thomas Coleman's evidence for 25 years. Did you think I'd leave something that important to chance? Then why didn't you destroy it? Because it was more useful as leverage. As long as that box existed, as long as it stayed hidden, Thomas Coleman was mine. Too afraid to talk, too guilty to forget. A perfect insurance policy. Victor stepped closer. His men stayed with the vehicles, watching. But then he died, and his widow became a loose end, and you showed up with your little rescue mission, and suddenly everything accelerated. You're admitting to murder in front of 50 witnesses. I'm admitting to nothing. I'm simply explaining the situation. In a few hours, a judge will rule that Margaret Coleman violated her loan covenant. Her property will be seized. That building will be demolished. And whatever secrets might have been hidden inside will disappear forever. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. The FBI is on their way. They have the photographs. They know about the bodies. Your little demolition plan is over. Something flickered in Victor's eyes, the first crack in his composure. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your phone. I'm sure your contacts in Nashville is already calling with very bad news. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in low, urgent tones. Ryan watched his face change, watched the realization hit. You sent them everywhere, Victor said slowly. The photographs, the letter, everything. Every news outlet, every federal agency, every investigative journalist who's ever wanted to take down a monster. By noon, your face will be on every screen in the country. Victor's composure shattered. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A drug trafficker who graduated to murder. A coward who buried his victims under parking structures and spent 30 years pretending to be legitimate. Ryan stepped forward. Here's what's going to happen, Stone. You are going to get back in your SUV, you're going to drive away, and you're going to spend the next few hours watching your empire crumble. And if I don't, then 53 Hells Angels are going to make sure you never leave this town. The two men stared at each other, years of hatred compressed into a single moment. Victor broke first. This isn't over, Mitchell, not by a long shot. Yes, it is, you just don't know it yet. Victor turned and walked back to his SUV. The convoy reversed, turned, disappeared down the road. Tyler approached Ryan. Boss, that felt too easy. It was. Victor Stone doesn't retreat. He doesn't give up. He's planning something. Inside, Margaret was waiting. What happened? I heard voices. Victor Stone came himself, wanted to intimidate us. It didn't work. So it's over? No, it's just beginning. The Pinewood County Courthouse had never seen anything like this. 53 Hells Angels lined the steps in perfect formation. Journalists swarmed the entrance. News vans from 3 different networks had set up across the street. A crowd of townspeople had gathered, watching the spectacle unfold. Ryan helped Margaret out of the truck. She was wearing her best dress, the one she saved for church and funerals. Her silver hair was pinned back, her face calm and determined. You ready? Ryan asked. I've been ready for 30 years. I just didn't know it until now. They walked up the courthouse steps together. The crowd parted for them. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. Ryan ignored all of it. His eyes were fixed on the entrance. Inside, they found Pinewood Property Development's legal team already seated. 3 lawyers in expensive suits, briefcases open, documents spread across their table. They looked confident, prepared, certain of victory. Margaret's side of the courtroom was different. Sam Turner sat alone at the defense table, his laptop open, his face unreadable. But behind them, the gallery was packed. Bikers filled every seat. Townspeople stood along the walls. Henry Adams had claimed a spot in the front row, his jaw set with determination. The message was clear. Margaret Coleman wasn't alone. At exactly 2 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order. All rise. Judge Patricia Holloway entered. Mid-60s, gray hair, sharp eyes behind thin glasses. She surveyed the packed courtroom with an expression that suggested she'd seen spectacles before and wasn't impressed. This is an emergency hearing regarding the foreclosure of the property known as Coleman's Kitchen, owned by Margaret Ann Coleman. Counsel, please identify yourselves for the record. Pinewood Property Development's lead attorney stood. Theodore Marsh, Your Honor, representing Pinewood Property Development. Sam stood. Sam Turner, Your Honor, representing Mrs. Coleman. The judge nodded. Ms. Marsh, you filed the emergency motion. Proceed. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a straightforward matter of contract law. Mrs. Coleman violated the terms of her mortgage by making unauthorized structural modifications to her property, specifically a commercial walk-in freezer installed in 2021 without written authorization from the mortgage holder. He held up a document. The loan covenant clearly states that any structural modifications require prior written approval. Mrs. Coleman failed to obtain this approval. As such, the full balance of the loan is immediately due. She has failed to pay. Foreclosure is the only remedy. The judge turned to Sam. Mr. Turner, Sam stood slowly, deliberately. Your Honor, this case isn't about a freezer. It isn't about a technical violation of a contract Mrs. Coleman never understood. This case is about something much bigger. He opened his laptop. Pinewood Property Development is not a legitimate real estate company. It's a shell corporation owned by Stone Holdings, which is itself controlled by Victor Stone, a convicted drug trafficker who served 10 years in federal prison. Marsh shot to his feet. Objection. This is completely irrelevant to the foreclosure matter. Overruled. Continue, Mr. Turner. Thank you, Your Honor. For the past 3 years, Pinewood Property Development has systematically acquired properties across Tennessee using predatory lending practices. They target elderly property owners, particularly those with longtime family businesses. They purchase their mortgages through complex subsidiary arrangements, then find technical violations to justify foreclosure. He clicked to the next slide. In every case, the acquired properties have been funneled into offshore accounts connected to Victor Stone's original criminal enterprise. This isn't real estate development. It's money laundering on a massive scale. Marsh was turning red. Your Honor, these are baseless accusations with no evidentiary support. Actually, Your Honor, I have substantial evidentiary support, including testimony from federal investigators who are currently assembling a case against Mr. Stone and his associates. Sam pulled up another document. I also have something else, something directly relevant to Mrs. Coleman's situation. Mrs. Coleman's late husband, Thomas Coleman, worked for Victor Stone's construction company in the early 1990s. During that time, he witnessed 3 murders, men killed on Stone's orders and buried beneath a parking structure in Louisville. Gasps from the gallery. Marsh's face went pale. Mr. Coleman documented what he saw. Photographs, a written statement, evidence he kept hidden for 30 years because he feared for his family's safety. Sam held up the manila envelope. This evidence was provided to the FBI this morning. Federal agents are currently executing search warrants at multiple Stone Holdings properties. The parking structure in question is being excavated as we speak. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Turner, are you suggesting that this foreclosure is connected to these alleged murders? I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that Victor Stone has been targeting Margaret Coleman specifically because of her connection to her late husband's testimony. The timing is not coincidental. Pinewood Property Development acquired her mortgage 6 months ago, immediately after new evidence emerged linking Stone to multiple crimes. That's a lie, Marsh shouted. There's no connection whatsoever. Is there not? Sam pulled up his final slide. This is a communication log from Pinewood Property Development's internal servers, obtained through court-ordered discovery in a parallel civil case. It shows that Victor Stone himself approved the acquisition of Mrs. Coleman's mortgage using the code phrase, legacy cleanup. The courtroom erupted. Judge Holloway banged her gavel. Order! Order in this court. It took nearly 5 minutes to restore calm. When silence finally returned, the judge fixed Marsh with a cold stare. Mr. Marsh, were you aware of your client's connection to Victor Stone? Marsh's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. I'll take that as no. Mr. Turner, I'm going to need to see all of this evidence entered into the record. I'm also issuing an immediate stay on all foreclosure proceedings pending a full investigation. Margaret grabbed Ryan's arm. What does that mean? It means we won, at least for now. The judge continued. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Tennessee Attorney General's office and recommending a federal investigation into Pinewood Property Development's practices across the state. This hearing is adjourned. She banged her gavel once more. The moment the judge left the bench, chaos erupted. Journalists rushed towards Sam, shouting questions. Pinewood Property Development's lawyers gathered their documents and fled through a side door. The gallery exploded into cheers and applause. Ryan pulled Margaret through the crowd, shielding her from the cameras. We need to get you somewhere safe. This isn't over yet. What do you mean? Victor just watched his empire start to crumble. Men like him don't go quietly. As if on cue, Ryan's phone buzzed. Tyler Brooks. Ryan, we've got a problem. What now? Victor's convoy, it's back, and this time they're not stopping outside town. Ryan's blood went cold. How many? All 12 vehicles, heading straight for the courthouse. Ryan grabbed Margaret's hand and pushed through the crowd toward the back exit. What's happening? Margaret asked. Victor's making his last move. We need to go, right now. They burst through the rear doors just as the first SUV came around the corner. Ryan pulled Margaret behind a concrete pillar. Bikers were already moving, forming a defensive line between the vehicles and the courthouse. The SUV stopped. Doors opened. But instead of armed men, federal agents emerged. FBI eye jackets, drawn weapons, a tactical team spreading out with military precision, and behind them, walking slowly toward the courthouse with his hands raised, was Victor Stone, in handcuffs. A woman in a dark suit approached Ryan, FBI badge visible on her belt. Ryan Mitchell? Yes. Special Agent Martinez. Your evidence checked out. We picked up Stone trying to flee to the airport. He's being charged with 3 counts of murder, money laundering, witness intimidation, and about a dozen other things we're still cataloging. Ryan looked at Victor Stone, the monster who had haunted his nightmares for 20 years. Stone met his eyes. Nothing in his expression. No fear, no anger, just cold, empty calculation. This isn't over, Stone said quietly as agents led him past. You think you've won, but men like me don't stay locked up, and I have a very long memory. Ryan stepped closer to him. So do I. And I remember everything you did, everything you tried to do. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, Stone, and every day you're going to remember that a broken boy from a dumpster is the one who put you there. Something flickered in Stone's eyes. The first real emotion Ryan had ever seen from him, fear. Then the agents pushed him into the waiting vehicle, and Victor Stone disappeared from Ryan's life forever. Margaret stood beside him watching the convoy pull away. Is it really over? Ryan put his arm around her shoulders. The hard part is, now comes the rest. What rest? He looked at her, the woman who had saved his life. The woman who had kept her husband's secret for 30 years without even knowing it. The woman who had stood up against a monster and refused to back down. Now we build something better for Thomas, for Michael, for everyone who ever needed a second chance and didn't get one. Margaret leaned into him. That sounds like a good plan. Around them, bikers were embracing. Townspeople were celebrating. Journalists were filing stories that would be broadcast across the country within hours. But Ryan barely noticed any of it. He was thinking about a winter night 21 years ago. A bowl of soup, a sleeping bag in a storage room. 5 words that had changed everything. You matter, Ryan Mitchell. He finally understood what those words meant. Not just for him, for everyone who had ever been broken and needed someone to help them see they could be whole again. And standing there surrounded by his brothers, with the woman who had started it all beside him, Ryan Mitchell made a promise. He would spend the rest of his life proving her right, 1 second chance at a time. 6 months later, they broke ground on the Michael Coleman Second Chance Center. The location was a vacant lot 3 blocks from Coleman's kitchen. The funding came from recovered assets from Victor Stone's empire, donations from across the country, and contributions from Hells Angels chapters in 23 states. Margaret stood at the ceremony surrounded by bikers, townspeople, journalists, and politicians who suddenly wanted to be associated with the story that had captured the nation's attention. Ryan handed her a golden shovel. You should do the honors. Me, this is your center. No, it's Michael's center, and Thomas's, and yours. I'm just the messenger. Margaret took the shovel. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked out at the crowd. I don't have a speech prepared. I'm just a baker from a small town. I make cinnamon rolls and coffee and try to treat people right. She paused. But I've learned something these past few months, something I wish I'd understood a long time ago. She looked at Ryan. We don't get to choose how our kindness multiplies. We don't get to see where our good deeds travel. We plant seeds and hope they grow, but we rarely get to see the forest. Her voice strengthened. 21 years ago, I fed a hungry teenager, that's all. I didn't save anyone. I didn't change the world. I made soup. She gestured at the crowd, at the cameras. But look what that soup became. Look what grew from that tiny seed. Thousands of kids helped. A monster brought to justice. Families given closure after 30 years. She lifted the shovel. My son Michael believed everyone deserves a chance. He died believing that. My husband Thomas saw terrible things and spent his life trying to make up for his silence. This center honors both of them. She drove the shovel into the earth. And it honors every person who's ever been thrown away by the world and refused to give up. You matter. Never forget that. The crowd erupted in applause. Ryan stood beside her, tears streaming down his face as photographers captured the moment. This is what she meant. This is what kindness looks like when you follow it all the way to the end. 1 year later, Ryan stood in Maggie's living room. On the mantel were 3 photographs now. Michael in his uniform, Thomas in front of the diner, and a new one. Margaret surrounded by the first graduating class of the Michael Coleman Second Chance Center. 17 kids who had entered the program broken and were leaving with skills, support, and something far more valuable: the belief that they mattered. The doorbell rang. Margaret answered it. Voices, multiple voices, excited chatter. She returned with Sophia beside her. Behind Sophia were 11 other graduates from the center's first class. Surprise, we wanted to celebrate the anniversary together. Ryan stared at them. These kids who had been so broken a year ago, now standing taller, smiling, wearing clean clothes and hopeful expressions. You guys didn't have to do this. Yeah, we did. You and Maggie gave us something nobody else did. The least we can do is show up with cake. Sophia was holding a cake, written in slightly uneven frosting. Thank you for seeing us. After the cake was gone and the conversations had settled into comfortable silence, Sophia stood up. Can I say something? Everyone quieted. A year ago, I walked into that center ready to fail. I figured it was just another place that would pretend to care until they got tired of me. That's how it always worked. She looked at Margaret. But you were different, and you didn't try to fix me. You didn't lecture me about my choices. You just saw me, treated me like I was worth something, even when I couldn't see it myself. Her voice wavered. You told me once that you didn't save Ryan. You just reminded him he was worth saving. Well, you did the same thing for me, and Derek, and everyone in this room. She wiped her eyes. So thank you, not just for the center, not just for the programs. Thank you for not giving up on us when everyone else did, when the room was silent. Then Derek started clapping, then Jessica. Then everyone was standing, applauding, some of them crying. Ryan looked at Margaret across the crowded room. She was crying too. Happy tears. The tears of a woman who had lost everything and somehow found something even more precious. She caught his eye and smiled. And Ryan knew with absolute certainty that this was what his whole life had been building toward. Not power, not respect, not even justice. This room full of second chances. This family built from broken pieces. This proof that kindness was the strongest force in the world. Later that night, Ryan and Margaret sat on her porch watching the stars. You know what I think about sometimes? All those ripples, the ones we can see and the ones we can't. Margaret said, Sophia is going to help other kids someday. Derek is going to be a mentor. Jessica will become a nurse and save lives. And every single one of them will carry a piece of what we taught them. She turned back to face him. And those people will teach others, who will teach others, who will teach others, forever and ever, spreading outward in ways we'll never see. The ripple effect. Exactly. One bowl of soup, one warm place to sleep, one person saying you matter. That's all it takes to start something that never ends. Ryan walked over and hugged her, this woman who had given him everything without even knowing it. This ordinary baker from a small town who had changed the world simply by choosing kindness. Thank you, Maggie, for all of it. Thank you, Ryan, for coming back, for showing me what my little act of kindness became. They stood in Michael's old room, surrounded by plans for a future neither of them could have imagined. And in that moment, everything made sense. All the pain, all the loss, all the years of wondering and hoping and fighting, it had all led here, to this, to a legacy that would outlive them both. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance. Inside, two people who had saved each other stood in the light, and somewhere in a better place, Thomas Coleman and Michael Coleman watched over them. Proud, at peace, finally at rest, because in the end the story was simple. A widow fed a homeless boy. That boy became a man who helped thousands. Those thousands would help millions. And kindness, true kindness, the kind that sees value in the broken and refuses to look away, proved once again that it was the most powerful force in the universe. Not because it was dramatic or heroic or newsworthy, but because it was simple, freely given, and infinite in its reach. One act of kindness changed everything. One person choosing to see another change the world. And that truth, that beautiful, unshakable truth, would echo through generations yet unborn. Because broken doesn't mean finished. Where you start doesn't determine where you end. And every single person, no matter how lost, no matter how forgotten, matters. End of part 3, word count, 7,014 words.